How many picks do you need? But I'll keep them there just in case.
Well, that's probably a pretty good place to start, because when you first started making music, did you ever in your wildest dreams think you'd be doing the things that you were doing?
No, I had no idea. I mean, you don't. When I was a kid, you don't think further than next week, really, do you? So I had no idea at all what would happen. And even when we came together, you know, as the Moody's as we are now, then that was in August 1966. And none of us had any idea. We just thought we'd play it for a few months and see how it went.
Did you have a day job back at that time?
No, no, no. I never had a day job.
Really?
No, I left. Hey, yes. No, I never had a day job to give up.
So you're still waiting?
I can't do anything, so you know. I could be a guitar tech. But, I said to my guitar tech one night, I said, "Oh, listen, I just didn't feel well, you know, and I wasn't feeling good." And I said, "Oh, come on," I said, "You know all of these songs. You can play all of these songs, you know, backwards." And he said, "Yeah." He's from Dallas. He said, but can you tune?" I said, "Yeah, well, I can, as a matter of fact, yeah."
It works.
Yeah, yeah.
When you first joined the Moody Blues, you'd been in a bunch of different bands at that point in time, and were you basically doing cover material back then?
No, I became a professional musician when I left school, so I was 17, just 17, and what that meant was that I stayed in bed, because that was it. A lot of my friends we're turning pro, we used to call it, and then what it meant was you stay in bed in the morning, and thought, oh, this is great, I'm a professional musician, and that's why I became a professional musician, to stay in bed, and I think that's the purpose of the whole thing, to be honest.
So were you starting out thinking you were going to be a songwriter or a player?
No, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just had a big ego, and you know, I wanted some nice clothes, and I answered an advertisement in the Melody Maker. I was very lucky. I was with a lot of groups in my hometown in Swindon. I earned enough money to buy a Gibson and a Vox amp. That was before I left school. And then I left school. I answered an ad in the Melody Maker, and I got a job as a guitar player for a guy called Marty Wilde, who was a rock and roll singer in the early 60s, and I was his guitar player for a year and a half. So, and that was
literally
a baptism of fire.
You just answered an ad?
Yeah, I just answered an ad in the Melody
Guitar
Maker.
player wanted?
Yeah, for a name.
Good hair.
Well, but I know that was how people got jobs. The Melody Maker was a fantastic newspaper for that. You remember that?
Sure,
you remember. And everything was in that, and it was like variety, being in the music, in the theatre world.
Musically, what were you listening to at that point? Were you building a record collection? Were there a lot of artists you were, really looking forward to their records? Who were your heroes back then?
Well, you see, that this was 1964, so the Beatles had happened in 1963, and then the whole world was different. I remember walking out of my front door and down the street, and the world was a different place, because the Beatles were there, and they were British, and that's it. Everything was completely different. I promise you. Then. And
it was a small circle of friends, really. If you were in a band, everybody kind of knew each other back then.
Yeah. And then after really Nights in White Satin, after we dumped the blue suits and the rhythm and blues, which we were rubbish at, we didn't know how to do it. Denny, who sang Go Now, he was great at it, but the rest of us were useless at it. And it showed, and our price really dropped. After we dumped the blue suits and just started doing our own material, then we started to earn a lot of money to live in London properly, and then we became part of that whole thing that was the London swinging 60s, and it was wonderful. It was like a kind of club, yeah. Everybody knew everybody. I met everybody, I knew everybody, and it was wonderful, elegant. It was a very elegant time. People think, oh, it was all sort of drugs and people lying around. Well, yes, but they were lying around quite elegantly. and looking very pretty. Very nice,
Good
very
clothes,
nice clothes.
yeah.
Well, you know, funny enough, that's when we first came to America. I won't labour this point, but when we first, on our first tour here, we ended up. I mentioned last night that we were offered 2 gigs for Bill Graham, the promoter. One in New York at the Fillmore East, the other at the Fillmore West. Only they were 10 weeks apart, so we worked our way across the country with a U-Haul truck. We didn't have the money to go home, and we ended up at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. And on the bill was a young group of boys they were called CTA then. They were the Chicago Transit Authority, and they became Chicago. And everybody from Dave Crosby, who came to see us in New York as well, they'd heard Days of Future Past and that. And they all wanted, it wasn't about our music. They said, "Where did you get your clothes?" And because they'd never seen clothes like that. The London and British clothes that the boys were wearing were just they just looked great.
Were you a King's Row kind of guy, or?
Yeah, sure. And the Apple shop was nice.
Right.
There was places that you went to.
The Fool, right?
The Fool, yes.
Yeah.
The girls and boys that did, well, it was a Hjörger and it was 2 Scandinavian people,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fool, yeah.
When you were growing up, there must have been somebody that, hit you and said, "This is why I want to be a musician." Who would that have been?
My music teacher. You're useless.
Thank you very much, Will.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Were you listening to Buddy Holly?
Oh my
Was
God,
it
I've always
Elvis? Was it?
Well, of course, you listen to Elvis, and Johnny Ray was the first one for me because it was on the radio when I was a little boy, like 4 and 5, and I heard that it was just something very different and something, that cry in his voice was lovely. And then Elvis, of course, but completely different. But Elvis was number one, but a very different world away. And Buddy Holly, as soon as I heard Buddy Holly, I was focused and I knew what I want. And as you know, Buddy Holly was massive in the United Kingdom and always will be. And he's my all-time hero. And Bobby Darin I used to love too because he wore great Italian suits and he made great, every record was different. I love
Comes
Bobby
back to the
Darin.
clothes again, right?
I love Bobby Darin, yeah.
Were you playing those songs in cover bands at the time too? Buddy Holly songs?
I was. When I was a kid at school, Buddy Holly was the thing, to do. Buddy Holly, and then, of course, for a lot of other people, Cliff, Richard, and the Shadows.
Sure. Didn't happen here, but happened pretty big over there.
Yeah.